The Game of Zen explores the often overlooked ways in which professional, personal, and spiritual growth are interrelated. We dive deep into the life teachings of the Buddha and the mindfulness practices of Zen, revealing how they can help us dramatically expand our possibilities for wholehearted work, life, and play.
Hello, and welcome to episode 3 of the Game of Zen podcast. Today, we'll be talking about the second noble truth. I'm here with my good friend, Sensei Paul Giodo Augustinelli. What's up, Paul?
Hey, Scott. I'm having a good day. Hope that you are too. Happy to be here.
I'm talking to you, so it's a good day. So today's topic, the second noble truth. In our first episode, we talked about suffering. And today, we're going to really focus on the causes of it. And so can you give us sort of an intro to this noble truth and how do we identify?
Yeah, so we talked last time about how we can look at this form of suffering the Buddha talked about as kind of in a medical model, where the first noble truth is the symptoms that we're experiencing, the sense of insufficiency in our lives. Some people call it suffering. Is what we all experience, quite a lot of. Some people call it out of jointness. I really like that definition. So the second noble truth is the diagnosis, right? It's like, okay, well, what is causing that feeling that we're having so persistently? And what the Buddha said is this feeling is caused by what he called attachment. And that's in the English translation, it's kind of too simplistic in a way if we just think about it as, oh, well, I'm just not supposed to be attached to anything. It can actually be taken the wrong way. The Buddha was very precise that attachment is about a kind of a activated relationship with things. You could say that the self creates a unhealthy or a discordant kind of relationship with things that manifests in one of three ways, or one or more of three ways: craving, aversion, and ignorance. So craving, we hold on to something or we pull it towards us. Aversion, we push something away, we don't want it. We develop a hostile relationship with it. Or ignorance is we just turn away from it or we don't see it clearly. And any of these three, usually a cocktail of these three relationships that we have with things, and by things I mean, in the general sense, it could be state conditions, it could be feelings, it could be people, it could be money, it could be actual things, right? This applies to our relationship to the world. When we have these things going on, that's what is creating this persistent feeling of dis-ease or decenteredness.
Yeah, and so let's talk a little bit about why this is relevant. And I would like to sort of focus on both the business and the personal side. Going through, being an entrepreneur, there's a lot of times when craving and aversion come in, and ignorance. So how is this relevant to, our daily lives?
Yeah, well, it's incredibly relevant to our daily lives and to our activities in the world, because it's a core recognition of how we're creating this experience, right? It's just so persistent. We can all recognize that this out of jointness we feel is so persistent for all of us. So, I mean, to me, there's nothing more relevant than understanding how I'm creating my own unhappiness in the world. And it's more than it's actually more than just unhappiness. I mean, we all want to be happy. We all want to be kind of in a centered, kind of nourished place, and we want to thrive. But even more than that, our functioning in the world is compromised when we are out of joint in this way. So our relationships go astray. Our work in the world, whatever our profession may be, is perversely kind of motivated when, instead of just putting ourselves wholeheartedly into the work we want to do, we end up trying to fight ourselves in a certain way. So I've always said that, Zen boils down to learning how to get out of your own way. And this is just can be more complicated than it sounds. until we understand what it is we're doing that we need to learn to stop doing.
Yeah, and I also find, like, the life of an entrepreneur, we always experience like cravings for success and wealth and recognition, and then we get attached to projects and outcome and numbers, and profits and things like that. And so I find that it's almost like a daily thing that comes up every day, and it's really like, how do we move past that suffering and get back in the joint when these things are coming at us all the time?
Yeah, exactly. And I found a lot of aid in the perspective when I learned that the Buddhist teachings had boiled down the diagnosis to these three things: craving, aversion, and ignorance. It's like, oh, really? It's one of those, one or more of those three things. And I have to say that in 20 years of practicing deeply with this, every time I find some kind of discord within myself, or in my functioning in the world, I say, okay, what am I holding on to? What am I
Mhm,
trying to push away? Or what am
mhm.
I missing? And that's the path.
I think that's really key, and I think the ability to move past the setbacks and the failures is really a key part of this, because you do hold on. Nothing ever goes exactly according to plan,
Right.
and so you have to deal with what comes next. The Mike Tyson quote: "Everybody's got a plan till they get punched in the face."
Yeah.
In the boxing ring, and so
Yeah.
I feel that way in business sometimes.
Right. And that's what the world is sort of set up to punch us in the face, over and over, unfortunately. Um, and sometimes the aggressions or the challenges are, less violent than that. But we can always, work with everything, that the world faces us with equanimity, as long
Mhm.
as we're not holding on to our ideas about the way they're supposed to be.
Can you explain more about equanimity in business? And, because I think that's super important. There's so many different people and places that you deal with. And I think that's one of the key things for really lowering your level of suffering.
Yeah, equanimity is the absolute most crucial quality to cultivate in your life and also in your work. There was a study done about 9 years ago that asked corporate employees, a bunch of, I mean, like 12,000. It was a huge study. What are the qualities that they most want in a leader? And there were about 70 something qualities that kind of made the list of core qualities they want to see in their leader. But right at the center of all of those, the single most important one was what they termed centeredness.
Hmm.
And centeredness was at the basis, I should say, of all the other qualities that the leader needed to possess in order to be effective in their work. To me, centeredness is equanimity. It's
Hmm.
exactly that. It's not being pulled off of your own center in what's required in the moment by your desire that things be different than they are. Okay. Your ideas about the way things should be,
Hmm.
your anger and frustration when they're not the way they should be, or your intense efforts to get them to turn into what you want them to be. All of that stuff pulls you off center. So
Hmm.
equanimity is this core ability to be with the present moment, and not to be afflicted by these forms of attachment that are at the root of all of our dysfunctions.
Yeah, and I think the more you practice that, the better you get at it,
Yeah.
because you sort of recognize that it's happening, and you have this attachment to something, and you're like, you know what, I'm just gonna remain calm. It's gonna, things are gonna change, and I do want to get to impermanence in business and change and the ups and downs. There's very few people that have a smooth ride every single day. When you're in a business. So how does impermanence help you realize that that craving is going to go away, or the attachment is not permanent, and things are going to change and things will get better?
Yeah. Well, impermanence is both the source and the cure for our suffering in some ways, right? This is actually where the ignorance comes in. or the consciousness comes in, right? Because the things that we want or the things that we like, when we have them, they go away, right?
Yeah.
So the impermanence of the good stuff causes us to suffer if we hold on to it, right? But recognizing that things are always changing
Hmm.
means that we will accept the fact that things will go, and we also will be encouraged by the fact that the bad stuff is also going to go.
Yes. Yes.
Right?
Yeah, and I think there's always like a fear of failure for entrepreneurs, and this could be, you know, in your personal life too. But like, you know, you fear that something's not going to work out right, and you have this like future thought, like, what if this business doesn't work? What if my marriage doesn't work? What if my kids, you know, aren't good kids or something? Like, how do you get yourself past that fear and not worry as much about what's going to happen in the future and focus on the present moment?
Well, I think the key is to recognize that you're actually storytelling, and your feelings are wrapped up in the story, and the story is just a story, right? So definitely, craving, aversion, and ignorance are all working in these situations, right? We
Yeah.
desire that the story turn out a certain way. We're afraid it's going to turn out this other way. One thing we call success, the other thing we call failure.
Hmm.
But the fundamental ignorance at play is that that's just your story. It has nothing to do really with reality. It has a
Hmm.
lot to do with your desires and your fears, which are meaningful, but which are not really reality.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that the key for me personally has been recognizing when this is happening, really, and really understanding it very quickly. Like sometimes, you know, it might take me like a week and I think about something and I'm like, oh, yeah, by the way, you know, I was attached to a certain outcome here and feared failure. But now it's a lot quicker. So in my practice, recognizing it is quicker. And so talk about how the ability to recognize what's happening in your life that are bringing up these feelings is one of the first steps to get past it.
It's kind of an essential part, yeah, to get past it is to recognize that you're holding on to something, or recognizing that you're pushing something away, or recognizing that you're missing something, right? And in the first two, in a way, there's like a you don't even necessarily have to consciously um, verbalize it to yourself. It's almost like an energy, right? If you can feel that you're holding on to something or obsessing about something, there's like a just an energy in your body that
Yeah.
you kind of notice yourself sort of obsessing over something. We all know this, right? I mean, anxiety is like a feeling in the body that we're just spinning around and around the same thing, right? So of course it usually does come with repetitive thought patterns and
Hmm.
repetitive self-talk that tends to happen. So recognizing the feeling and then noticing yourself, you know, in these patterns is essential. So then you can kind of, you know, try to counteract that. So the counteracting forces kind of take the form of the opposite, right? So craving, to counteract craving, we let go.
Hmm.
Right? We've got this energy of pulling something towards us, and now the energy is going to be, well, let me let go of that. Let me just the energy of just, okay, I'm not going to hold on to this or clutch or pull this towards me anymore. It's something that you can do within your own nervous system. Okay,
Hmm.
it's more than just something you're telling yourself that you can do this. Um, Letting come is the antidote to our aversion, putting away. I don't want that. I just don't want that. I resist what you're saying. I resist your presence. I am not going to deal with this thing that I call failure. I don't want it to happen. Okay. And we have a whole energetic around that aversion. So if you can shift into, okay, come what may. All right. I'm not going to put my energy into resisting this. I'm going to let come what may. And always it will be different than what you have made it out to be in your mind, even something like failure, right?
Mhm.
Everybody, all of us entrepreneurs have experienced that. Is we we don't want to lose this contract. We don't want this business to go south. Um, and it happens.
Yep, it
It
does.
happens. And it happens. And what is it, the end of the world? Absolutely not. You know, feels bad for whatever period of time, but you're still alive. You've learned your lessons. You get up and you move on. So it's never as bad as our fears make it out to be. So that gets at the ignorance part, which is, to really see things and allow them to be as they truly are. And this can actually be, and Buddha says that ignorance is the most difficult of these forms of attachment to work with,
Mhm.
because you kind of have an emotional charge wrapped up with your cravings and your aversions, but you don't really with your ignorance. You don't know what you don't know for the
Mhm.
most part. So you have to be motivated in some way to learn and to see and to inquire into what's going on with yourself and with your world, right? And then when you do that, you do tend to see that things are kind of simpler than you thought they were,
Yes.
and your way forward tends to be rather clear to
Yeah.
you. And all of that is the way to cultivate equanimity.
Yeah. Yeah. It's great. So let go, let come, let be. This is one of your best expressions. I love that.
Thank you.
And there's a lot of meaning behind it. So, do you have any experience in your work with clients that might be relevant for something like this? Maybe an example of how you've helped someone through this?
Yeah, I want to bat it over to you first, Scott. I've been
Okay.
talking for a while. What you
Okay.
tell me?
Good point. All right, cool. Yeah. So I was thinking about this, and so I'm involved in venture capital, and I'm in the cannabis world, and it's, to say the least, it's a wacky world, right? It's there's a lot of stuff going on, and it's been struggle the last year and a half or so, and it's not moving as fast as I would like. And I have a bunch of different projects that, if they were to move faster, startups, some are advanced businesses that are trying to have an exit, and I've grown frustrated with the slowness or the lack of progress in the space, and some of it has to do with regulation, some of it has to do with the actual businesses, and so I realized that I'm attached to progress. I like to move the football down the football field and get it in the end zone, and sometimes it's like two steps forward, one step back, and it's really been frustrating. So I've had to, with a lot of these things, I've had to kind of say, okay, this one is going to take some time. Let me try the next project and maybe that'll go faster. And I've had to adjust my thinking of when things are going to happen. And it's not been easy, because I want anything I want to get involved with, I want it to be successful. And some of these things are just taking too darn long. And it just causes me anxiety. Like, why hasn't this company gone forward? Why hasn't I invested money 7 years ago in this deal? I haven't gotten a return yet. And so I find that this is almost a daily occurrence with me whenever I check my email and I'm looking for good news, and it's not there. I have to just get past it. And I also have to understand that some of these businesses aren't going to make it. Not, when you're in venture and you have a fund, if you get 5 out of 10 right, you're doing great, and so that's kind of what I've been going through lately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could comment on what, when you use the term "get past it," is like the key to working with these things is to continue to care without being attached to the outcome. Right. So we're talking about attachment, and the attachment does cause suffering. And if you have these relationships, these energetic relationships with the outcomes, this one, I really want this one, or I really can't stomach this one. That's what's causing the suffering. So that doesn't mean you don't care anymore. So getting past it, what you, I think, mean by that is to neutralize this kind of need for it to be that way. Okay, that's what it really is. But you can still care, and that actually takes some self work, if you will.
Yeah.
It's a real good understanding of yourself, and it's a maturation process. I guess I'd put it that way. It's a maturation process to learn how to continue to care really deeply, while not being attached to the outcome.
Yeah, and I think that it's literally every day, and I like meditation for this purpose too, because sometimes like I'll sit down and meditate, and I'll go through stuff, that's going on, and I'll work through that in my head. Like, okay, this project is stalled out, but you know what? I'm still going to try. I'm going to take that phone call today, but it might not go great today. It's okay. That's fine. There's something else that's going to happen, and so. I think that the more that I've gone through this, the better I am of dealing with it. But I don't like it sometimes.
You end up liking it because you have freedom,
Yeah.
right? You'll continue to suffer as long as you need things to be a certain way, because the world just doesn't work according to our whims and desires. So you'll continue to suffer, and then when you can face a really big setback. I have a coaching client now who, just found out a $30,000 investment just went to zero because of an international sanction, something completely outside of his control. And it just like threw him for a loop for a day. But then he realized that he could practice with this and just completely let it go.
Mm-hmm.
Put the stock certificate in a drawer, say I'll revisit it in 7 or 10 years, and whatever happens, happens. And the freedom that comes from that, when you're able to face a setback that used to throw you for a loop for weeks or months or more, and then you can just get over it in a day. And now, hey, guess what? The sun's shining again. My child is happy, and my dinner tastes great.
Mm-hmm.
That's an incredible freedom, to be alive.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I also just want to bring up something, personal too, because, we talked about, we met during COVID, and I was home a lot, and I wasn't able to see my friends a lot. I wasn't able to go out to restaurants and bars and things like that. And I was craving those things, but I also started studying more and practicing and reading and working with you. And I realized that, yes, I missed those things, and I couldn't really, I was worried about health related issues, but I had other things to keep me, I had other things that carried me through the day, and I learned and I grew as an individual. And I think one thing that really valuable was, use the time that you have to better yourself and to learn these things and to practice. And then when something else happens down the road, you'll be better prepared to deal with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's where the ignorance comes in. When you really are motivated to learn about yourself and how you're operating, it makes it so much easier for you to get out of your own way.
Yes. I need to get out of my own way sometimes, for sure. So Paul, talk to me about, like, with the second noble truth. We're going to lead into the third one in our next episode, but we know that once we recognize what's happening, we know there's a way out of it. And so how do we take that leap from, we've identified the suffering and we've identified the cause, what's next in our evolution here?
Yeah, well, the model is, diagnosis, prescription, cure, right? But as we talked about, I think in the last episode, the Four Noble Truths go diagnosis, and then cure, and then here's the prescription, and you just keep following the prescription until you get better. But that's an endless process. So we're never cured from, death, never cured from impermanence. Those are things that we never can escape, but we can, continue to relieve the suffering that we create for ourselves when we aren't in accord, with that impermanence. So the Buddha, identified what he called the Eightfold Path as the way to treat this condition we have, these tendencies towards attachment that we all have. And there's just ways of living our lives and holding our minds in relation to the world that really help. help us, work with these tendencies that we have.
I like the doctor analogy because I know, like, and I'm sure everybody knows this, when something's wrong with you, and the first day you realize something and you don't know what it is, you don't know what's causing a pain or a headache or whatever, there's a lot of fear involved and you're really
Yeah.
worried about it and you
Yeah.
don't know what's happening. And then you call the doctor and you make an appointment and then you get an x-ray or you get a consultation and then they say, okay, this is what's going on. And that you always feel a little bit better just knowing what's going on. Okay. And then the doctor says, I'm going to give you a prescription. I'm going to do surgery and I'm going to make you feel better. And so that whole process, is you feel better as you go along. But in the beginning, there's a lot of the unknown. So the more that you know about what's happening, and this is your physical health, your mental health, the health of your business, the health of your marriage, your children, and so on, it kind of goes across all of those things, right?
Yeah, definitely. I love that recognition, Scott. We do call the Dharma, the teachings here, a refuge. And that's what it gives you. It almost uh, allows your nervous system to relax into the truth of this condition that we all face as humans, and this wisdom that there's a way to actually meet it and treat it. And that's profound. It's a profound shift in your life when you can just learn these techniques or this reality or this truth. We call them the truths, whatever perspectives. However you want to take them in and understand them, and then start to experience them. It's a great blessing.
Yeah, it really is. And it is a comforting feeling too, that knowing that, I've identified something that's going on and I know the steps to get past it and move forward and so on. So it is a very powerful tool, and again, it takes practice and it takes learning and studying. And then you get to the point where it's almost second nature.
Yeah.
Where something happens and you're like, oh, that's because I was attached to this outcome. So I'm going to get rid of that and I'm going to feel better. And it works.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Yeah. The more and more we get in our own ways and the more and more we notice it, then the more it's like, oh, there we go. That's what I was doing.
Right. And the time between getting upset about something to feeling better about it is much shorter.
Much shorter.
I remember early in my career, things would happen in business and I would stew over it for weeks. I would, I didn't verbalize it a lot and I didn't deal with it. And so things would bother me for a long time. And then I realized, like, letting go, letting be, that's really how to get over it. And so that's something I've gotten a lot better at. And yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, learning business skills, what people call business skills, is very helpful in being a business person or being an entrepreneur. But learning about yourself is 10 times more important and more powerful. If you really understand how you're operating, then you can follow any playbook you want with greater ease and effectiveness.
Yeah, and one other thought on that is when you're an entrepreneur, a leader of a company, not only the more you learn about yourself, like you just said, but that also helps you with everybody that you work with too, and really identifying, their suffering, like what's going on in their life that's craving attachment. And it's your employees, it's your partners, your investors, your vendors, and so it kind of like feeds itself. Once you're better at it as a leader, then you can deal with all these other stakeholders in your company.
It's exactly true. It's you only see in other people the depth with which you see yourself. So, unfortunately, a lot of people who are not very reflective and maybe just consider themselves to be, just driven by shallow, motives, think everybody's driven by shallow motives because that's just how we see the world. But those who look inside and they say, oh, I've got this sort of complicated mix of emotions and drives going on, and I also have the ability to overcome them. You see that in other people too. So you hear that and you see that. And sometimes you can even understand other people at a deeper level than they understand themselves.
Yes.
When you understand yourself at a deep level. And that becomes a real boon in business, because you can, meet partners at a very deep level of authenticity. You can really just connect with people compassionately, understanding, where they're coming from. So it's always a benefit.
Yeah. By the way, you only see other people how you see the depth in yourself. That's great. That's a good nugget there from Paul. Thank you, Sensei Paul. Awesome. Cool. And so, yeah, we're gonna close out our episode with our usual first, the resources. I found a good book by the Dalai Lama called The Four Noble Truths, and I recommend that book. And I think that the more you read about these noble truths, the more, that's how I started to bring it into my own life. So I really read in depth, these truths, and that really helped me understand myself so I could help other people. So I recommend that book highly. And Paul, if you got a good meditation for us, let's go for it.
Okay. So my meditation for this one has three parts. It's let go, let come, let be. So it's the energetics that we talked about in this episode. And I'll go ahead and just give a little guidance into these three parts. Instead of, spending a lot of time with each one, if you want to spend time, you can go ahead and pause the video and then start it up again when you're ready. But the first one would be a let come meditation. So everybody can start by having an alert posture, a relaxed and alert posture in your seat. Close your eyes. And we'll start with letting go. So start by clenching your fists, clenching your hands, and just really, really hold it tight, really squeeze it tight. Okay. It even hurts. Okay. It's painful to squeeze your fingers so tight. And now on an exhale, relax your fingers. Let go. Okay. You can do this as many times as you like. The let come meditation is, to start with, we're going to have the energy of pushing away. So bring your hands up. You can open your eyes and look at me. If you're listening to this on audio, I'm holding my palms up by my face, facing outwards, and I'm pushing away. Push away. Push your hands away. Stay away. Stay away. Okay. And now turn the palms facing your face and wave your hands. Come. Let come. Let come. Okay. How much more relaxing, how much more easeful, how much more of a flow when you just allow to come what wants to come. And then for the third part, we're just going to recognize what is. So for this one, I'm going to have you open your eyes and letting be in your consciousness what is present in your awareness. Open your eyes, hold your palms open, facing up, and cast your gaze around your room and notice what's present. Okay, so those are three short exercises that can evoke this energy.
Excellent. I'm gonna remember that next time I have a difficult work situation, which may be tomorrow. So thank you very much, Paul. This is a great episode. Our next episode, we will go into the third and the fourth noble truth, and really figure out how to get past and get out of all this. So thank you, Paul. Check out our show notes for links to Paul's coaching, and sign up for a discovery session, and also subscribe to the newsletter and download this wherever you can find your podcasts. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thanks, Scott. I've enjoyed it.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us on this exploration into Zen Buddhism and its transformative influence on work and life. We hope you'll subscribe, share, and comment wherever you get your podcasts. May your journey be one of continuous growth and mindful living. From all of us here at Game of Zen, wishing you peace and prosperity on your path ahead.